Hello everyone and welcome to chapter 41 of this Flutter course. In previous chapters we've been talking quite a bit about Bloc, and I suggested that everybody who's taking this course to have a look at Bloc on their own time as well and to read the documentation, because I understand that Bloc could be something intimidating especially for those who haven't done, for instance, reactive programming before. However, it allows us to create a good separation between our UI and our business logic, as that's the point of using Bloc in a Flutter application, for instance. So in this chapter, we're going to build up on top of what we've already done, but from this chapter onwards, we're going to spend a little bit of time to clean the logic up. I mean, even though things may be working the way they are right now, but and there's like a saying in software development, which I usually strongly disagree with, that people say, if it's not broken, don't fix it. However, we've seen over and over again that things that work don't necessarily continue to work, or things that do work right now aren't necessarily working to the best of their abilities. So in order to make things a little bit better in our source code, we're going to spend a little bit of time to make the logic more thorough, and we have to think it more through. We've gotten started with Bloc, but we are not really there yet. So in this chapter, as you can see in the captions, we're going to handle auth block exceptions during login. So there's going to be quite a bit of moving around between different files, and we're going to basically clean things up. So we have to jump around between files, and I'm going to do my best to explain when I move between files as well, and what we're adding, what we're removing, and what we're modifying. So I hope you can also follow along. All right, so the first thing that we're going to do, as you can see in the caption here, is to remove our auth state login failure. So what we're going to do is, first of all, I'm going to bring the code to the main screen here so you see it as well, and I'm going to perhaps not even bring up strcpy, because I don't really think we need strcpy right now. So if we look at our auth state the way it is right now, I don't even know which file I opened. If I say command P auth state, so let's go to the auth state Dart file, okay? And as you can see in here, if I make the size a little bit bigger, you can see that we have, for instance, at the moment, a auth state login failure, and then there is an exception in there. And also we, for instance, have auth state logged in. So it seems like this is kind of like a pattern that we're following. So we have auth state logged in, and then auth state login failure with an exception. And then we have auth state logged out, and then a logout failure. However, we're going to clean this up a little bit here and make sure that we don't have just too many auth states that we have to handle in our application, okay? So what we need to do is to go into our logged out in here and add an exception. So the point of this is that if you, for instance, are logged out at the moment in the application, then there may also be an exception. And you probably are asking, like, how can a state of logout have an exception? Well, what we're going to do is that when you try to log into the application, let's say you're a complete new user and you haven't logged into the application before. Okay, you download the application. What is your state? Your state is logged out. Now, let's say that you make up an email and a password, and then you write that in the login screen, and then you press the login button. There are no users, let's say, in this system with those information that you provided. Then we're going to give you an exception. We're going to give you an error saying that, well, you couldn't log in. What is your state at that point? Well, you're still logged out. Okay, but now you're logged out, and then the screen also has to display some exceptions. So that's why we're going to build a build exception right into the auth state logged out. Okay, so let's go in here and just create an optional exception in here like that, and just call it exception. Okay, and I'm going to get help from Visual Studio Code to add that parameter into the initializer. And let me do some reshuffling on the screen as well so you see it better, and perhaps decrease the size of the font as well. Okay. So that was the first thing that we had to do. And you can see here that I've written, we don't really need auth state loading in auth event login. So what we're going to do is to go in our auth block. So let me just save this file and let's go to auth block. And in here we have this logged out with an exception, and we're going to soon fix that. Actually, let's see in here. Yep. Let's just say logged out at the moment, and let's pass a null exception in here as well. So I'm going to go to my notes as well to auth block to ensure that I have all the necessary information to pass through to you. So let's go in here and also fix that. So now we're in our auth block Dart file, and we fixed the error that was caused by us adding an optional parameter to our auth state logged out. All right, so we fixed that now. Then the next step, as the caption indicates, is we're going to remove the emitting of auth state loading from auth event login. So let's go ahead and do that. So we're going to go ahead and remove this emit from there. Okay. So we're not going to display any kind of like a login screen or anything. Okay. So as you can see in here, we're now going to start using BlocListener. I've talked about BlocListener, Bloc Provider, Bloc Builder, Bloc Consumer before, but for those of you who are not aware of what a BlocListener is, a BlocListener, as its name indicates, it's only going to listen to changes in the state of a block, for instance, our auth block, and it is going to allow you to issue some side effects. So a side effect is, for instance, displaying of a new screen, or displaying a dialog, or removing a dialog, or removing a screen from your navigation stack. These are side effects, okay? So they don't necessarily create a new widget to be, for instance, to replace the current widget that's on the screen. Instead, they can create something that is on the side, as its name indicates. So listener is perfect for that. So the listener property or the listener parameter of a block listener doesn't return a widget, except it's just a void block. So it allows you to do something with the incoming state. Okay. So what we're going to do now is we're going to start using block listener in our login view for this chapter, in order to basically handle our exceptions. Because if you have a look at our login view right now, you can see that we have this text button which reads login, and in there we're sending an event of login to our auth block, but we're also handling exceptions in this way. And as we mentioned before, these exceptions are never going to happen in this flow, because adding a new event to your block, or any block, doesn't necessarily have to throw an exception. The way it works for us, if you go back to our auth block and have a look at our login, you can see that if there is an exception, what we're going to do, what we're doing at the moment is, like, we're saying auth state login failure. And what we also need to do actually is to clean this up, because login failure shouldn't really be there. So I'm gonna go to my notes as well and make sure that seems to be completely removed. So let's go to our auth state actually, and as part of what we did in here, logged out, that we added the exception, let's go and remove this login failure completely. Okay, so now I'm in auth state Dart file, and I removed auth state. Where was it? Auth state login failure, because as I mentioned, a login failure is now expressed by the auth state logged out. All right, so you're either logged in or logged out. That's how I'm thinking. And if you're logged out, there may be an exception, which was therefore, for instance, caused during the login process. So now that we've removed that state, auth state login failure, in here, we're going to replace that in our auth block Dart file. We're going to replace that by auth state logged out, and then an exception in here. Okay, so that's that. So now we're talking about auth listeners. So let's go ahead and try to fix this up. So in our login view, so I'm just going to go into my notes as well. So if we have a look at our login view, right now we have a text button at the bottom of the screen, which looks like this. This is a text button and it has an on pressed with an async. Okay, so that is the actual login button. All right. And this login button is the one then for now that is going to take care of the exception handling using our um, BlocListener. So as you can see in the caption, it says our login view won't be rebuilt since the state is the same, but with an exception. So this is very important to actually understand. So let's have a look again at our auth state in here and auth state logged out. So even if we put a block listener and wrap this button, this text button here with a block listener, and you see once the application launches in our auth block, you can see that first we are logged out. Okay, so when the application launches, there is no user, then the state is logged out. And then when you press the login button with invalid credentials, for instance, then the state is still going to be logged out, but with an exception. However, this button won't be able to render or do anything with those exceptions because from our auth block's perspective, it is the same state, one without an exception and the other one with an exception, right? So it is the same state, or it is the same state class at least. So we are actually going to fix that, but for now we're just going to go ahead and do some cleanup in here. So let's go ahead and, as the caption indicates, we're going to handle some exceptions in our text button in here. So let's go and wrap our text button with a block listener. Okay, so I'm going to do command dot on this, and then I'm going to say wrap with block listener. And as I've mentioned this previously, I have these wrap with block, etc., because I have an extension in Visual Studio Code called Bloc that is from Felix Angelov. I hope that I'm pronouncing his name right. From Very Good Ventures, who are the people who are basically sponsoring Bloc library. So that is the reason I see all those wrap with block, etc. in Visual Studio Code. If you don't have that, you may have to do this part by hand, like to create a block listener in here. But I'm just going to take advantage of having that extension in Visual Studio Code and just say wrap with block listener. Okay. And here you can see it says, okay, what type of a block is it? And I'm going to just say it is the auth block. And it says, what state does it have? Then I'm going to say auth state. All right. And in here it says, okay, do whatever you want to do now. So that was the wrapping of our text button with a block listener. So that just went smoothly. Now what we have to do is, as you can see in the caption, is to handle 3 separate exceptions that might happen during login. Let's go back. Let's take a trip back to our Firebase auth provider. So Firebase auth provider Dart file, and have a look at our login code, as you can see in here. And you can see that there could be 3 exceptions that might happen that are called Firebase auth exception, user not found, wrong password, etc. So we need to handle these auth exceptions. So user not found, wrong password, and generic auth exception. Okay. So let's go in here and just say that, okay, if state is auth state logged out, like that. So remember, inside logged out, we could have an exception, an optional exception, and that's exactly what we're going to handle right now. So let's say if that was, you see, we said now if state is logged out. So now in this code block in here, Dart's going to understand that, okay, anywhere in here, state is auth state logged out. So you have access to exception right here. Okay. So then we're going to say if state exception is user not found auth exception, then we're going to display await show error dialog. So let's make this listener also async, and then we're going to say show error dialog, which we've coded before. Remember, this uses the generic dialog. So I'm going to go back here to login view Dart. And for the text, we're just going to say user not found. Okay. Then we have to also handle wrong password auth exception. So else if state exception is wrong password auth exception, then copy the text here. And then in here, we're just going to say wrong credentials. And remember, in anything that has to do with username and password, it's quite important that you don't tell the user which part of their credentials actually incorrect. Because if if there's a hacker who's trying to get into the system and just using the UI, then if you tell them wrong password, they'd be like, so I got the email right. It's just the password that's incorrect. So try not to tell a user, even if it's for good reasons, like even if you think, well, I have no hackers in my application, that it is still better just to say wrong credentials, because the user themselves probably already know that their email is correct or incorrect. So they're first going to check their email. So if the email is correct, then they're going to know that the password is incorrect. And as you'll see, we're going to later allow the user to reset their password. So just say wrong credentials, in my opinion, at least. So, and then else if state exception is generic auth exception, then we're going to display a dialog. And in here, we're just going to say authentication error. Okay. So that's that part done. So now we've handled those auth exceptions in our login view for our text button that says login. All right. So now that we have that, what we need to do is to remove the exception handling from the button itself. So at the moment, we have a huge try statement. Not a huge, actually. We have quite a long try catch statements here that we're catching 3 exceptions, which are now actually being caught here with our BlocListener. So let's go and not actually do that. So I want you to grab this context read, and where we actually pass the event of logging to our block, and remove this entire try and catch block and just do the context read at auth event login. So your on-pressed event, or sorry, on your on-pressed parameter of your text button should look very simple, just like this: email, password, and then you pass that event to your auth block. All right, so now that that has happened, let's actually check this out and see if everything works. And remember, this is like the beginning of us moving towards a better approach of handling our authentication and routing with blocks. So things aren't going to be smooth. Actually, we have a lot of problems we have to fix, but this is just like the beginning. So I'm going to bring strcpy in here, and let's just test this. So I'm going to do a hot restart, and now I'm on the login screen. So, okay, I'm then gonna go ahead in here and like put my email address, and then I'm gonna put some incorrect credentials in here. Okay, and I'm just gonna press the login button. And now you can see that our BlocListener is taking care of that. So it's saying, oh, you're logged out, and then it's wrong credentials. Okay, so I'm gonna press OK. Then I'm gonna just put an email address here that doesn't exist, and then press the login button, and now you can see user not found. Okay, and to be honest with you, if you wanna do what I actually said before, that it's better to not tell the user whether it's their user that is wrong or password, you may want to actually wrap both the state exception of user not found and wrong password and just display the same message. So you could do that by saying or in here. So or that, right? So, and then you can just display the same message, and then you could just remove this statement from there. So that could also work. But I'm just going to leave it like this. But just so you know, it is actually better to do that approach, which I just showed you momentarily. All right, so it seems like our BlocListener is working fine in the login view. So this was just the beginning, and we have a lot to fix. So we're going to fix those things in the coming chapters. Okay. Now that the code seems to be working for login view, let's just go ahead and do what we usually do and commit our work so that we don't lose the code if anything happens. So I'm going to minimize strcpy, make Visual Studio Code a little bit bigger in here, and increase the size quite dramatically. Let's have a look at our status. See, we've modified 3 files. So let's just say git commit. And in here, let's do git add all, and then we just do a normal commit in here as step 24. Okay. Now that is done, let's just push our changes to the remote, and then let's just also get status, nothing to commit, so everything was committed successfully, and then let's just tag as step 24, I believe, right? So that's our tag, and then we push our tags, and let's have a look at our tags to this point. 23 we have, where's 24? And there is 24, so we have everything tagged successfully. Great. So as you can see, and as is tradition, we always talk about, at the end of every chapter, we talk about what we need to discuss in the chapter that's to come. And so you can see our routing and dialog handling isn't block based at the moment. We still have quite a lot of places in our application that we're seeing, for instance, navigator of context, push name, and removed until, or we're doing push name. So we've handled some bits and pieces of our application and we're using Bloc, but for instance, we aren't handling stuff in the register view or the verify email view, stuff like that. So we have a lot of work to do, and the next chapter is actually going to be a heavy one, but it's going to be such a key chapter in this entire course that if you could just stick with me throughout the next chapter, then you're going to see your application's architecture actually become more and more robust. So grab some refreshments if you want to, and I'll see you in the next chapter.